I went with, I think it was Matthew one time somewhere, and he was, obviously he's black. They didn't really take notice of him, but they just came and surrounded me, and I was just like, I want to be treated the same as him, like just like I don't want to be treated like I'm someone different. I want to be treated the same. So yeah, it was kind of like, I don't know, year 7 around there that I noticed the difference between myself and you guys.
But they moving back to Moi's point about like back in year 4, 5, 6, how the girls always used to flock to the white guys, Caleb William, Marcus guys. Bro, I don't know if you realize why, but that shit actually took a toll on us. I don't know when we used to create football players in FIFA. I remember like our guys were always white, always, always. TK's guy was called Nick. He had Marcus's haircut was covering the right eye of the yeah. You go to WWE, my guy was called Young Blood. He had a tattoo here. He was white from head to toe. I think it was
To be
actually
fair, I don't think I've ever created a black FIFA player.
back we just used to be white. I don't know,
Yeah.
skin, long socks, and I think that's actually kind of crazy because when you're creating a my player now, all my guys look like me. When I buy a Fortnite skin, it's black because they look like me. So I
You
think
know
it's
what's
kind of
weird?
weird
It's
that
the
at
same
such a
thing.
young age we already showing preference towards white skinned people and wanting to look like them and wanting to be like them. Like TK always had this dream to become point 0.5. Like that was TK's dream in year 7. Like that's what that's what
I did the same thing. My guy was always either black or point 0.5. I never made my FIFA player white. It was so weird. I don't know why. Like,
every
But Marcus, you're different, bro.
See, Marcus, you were the opposite.
Marcus, you're different. You guys are different.
Clearly.
I think Marcus
Marcus
experienced like the opposite of like what we did. So he had the same effect just because he was in a reverse situation.
wanted to be born black.
Yeah, like not even in like a bad way. Marcus, like it's all you essentially knew was like black people, black culture, and all that. So it was perfectly normal for you to want to be more like us, want to like fit in more.
But let me ask you guys something in relation to this is in school and even at home, like what TV shows you're exposed to and what textbooks you read, the photos in it, were there any black people that stood out in those things? No, it was
In some of
all...
the textbooks I've read, they'll show multiple faces. All the faces will be white. You'll maybe see like one black guy in the background, being a background character. No one main.
and that would be the token black guy, like in the French.
Yeah, the token black guy. Diversity hire.
in the French one, just to say we have different francophones from different places.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've noted that. I think like that's also something that probably contributed to you guys probably having ideal white avatars in football or other games or whatever is what you're exposed to.
Well, a question for everyone I've got here is what is your take on people going into African countries to volunteer? Do you think they do it for the right reasons? And do you think they exhibit a white slavery complex?
I think that it's in the way you do it. I think, first of all, it depends if it's an organization or it's an individual. Organizations, I feel like, are less likely to be displaying a white supremacist complex because they actually have to do the research to find out which area needs to be helped. But then obviously you have these social influencers who just come to different parts of Africa and go to the easiest slum there is to go to, the most accessible, take a few pictures, hand out like biscuits and juice, and then display themselves as charitable or caring about the poor, this and that. But I think at the end of the day, it's about how you're taught to think about people. Because like even in the US, Marcus, correct me if I'm wrong, but like the only time you'll see Africa on news or media is when there's a conflict or there's poaching
A starving kid.
or there's poor kids that you have to donate to. So like, just the narrative you're taught obviously is gonna play a part in how you act towards like, these people.
I meant white savior complex.
Yeah,
So they're coming in to save. They're saving these poor black kids. You can't do this and that.
Like I see a lot of like social media influencers, like pages. Like, do you know who Amanda Cerny is? You probably do.
Yeah.
Like, I saw her page one time. She posted this picture of her. I don't know, like holding a young black kid's hand, and I thought at the time, like, are you one of these people who are just doing it for the sake of, oh, look at me, I'm helping, I'm a good person, or do you genuinely care? And it's part of the thing is you can't really tell because you don't know them and you don't know what they're doing. So you have to take their word for it. But at the same time, they could so easily just be using these.
That's why it's like a kid. I would take every single influencer who posted a picture with a black kid, a starving black kid, saying donate here. I would take it with a grain of salt. Everything that they did, I would always be questioning, are you doing this because you just want more followers? Like people to look at you and be like, oh, look, he's helping, he or she is helping the poor, go donate, like I don't know, donate to go like them, get more followers and stuff, share this, show how compassionate they are, or is it the fact that like you actually care? Because like one of the main like indicators for me of if you actually care about the cause is if you do a follow up. Most of the people you see, influencers and big people you see do this, they do a post and then you never hear about it again. That's when you start to question, like, okay, I think they did this just for the followers. But if you see them continuously following up, like even now in the Black Lives Matter movement, we've got multiple influencers following up, using their platform, speaking up, telling people to like talk to their politicians, telling people to vote. And this isn't like just one day while the hashtag is still viral. Like if the hashtag goes down, I hope and I see that some people will still be there. They'll still be fighting. Even when this isn't trending, they'll still be out posting, people trying to inform people, educate people, tell people where to get educated on situations.
Yeah. In relation to the hashtag, I wanted to ask Sean, what's your take on like okay, it's not sudden, it's been going on for a very long time, but like not on this scale, what do you think is different this time?
About
the protests? Because we've seen Black Lives Matter protests before.
Yeah, it's been going on. You see, the thing is, right now, a lot more eyes are on it because we're in a position where everyone is at home and we're exposed to a lot more information than we were before because a lot of people are trying to better themselves or just stuck watching TV or Netflix or whatever. So the thing is, the way the campaign was brought out was, I can't breathe. And how long was it? The guy was being knelt on for 8 minutes and
46 seconds.
46 seconds. They've sort of put themselves in that relation. Imagine you in that point. You've got to say enough's enough. Yeah. You can't just let these guys go with a slap on the wrist arrangement anymore. So I think a lot more people were angered by just that relation of pain. And unfortunately, we live in a world where trends set the norm for a while. And as Taku said, even though this thing is trending and a lot of people are jumping on it, it will unfortunately die down and something else will come and distract us. Like already people are now talking about Yemen and how bad it is there. But what's different about this is 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Someone's been knelt on. Is that acceptable? No. And they're bringing up all the other cases, all the other burnt up feelings, because it's not, you can't just let this go on.
I think the moment, I don't know about you guys, but I think the moment that I knew I had to do something for this movement was when I went to the Cambridge Black Lives Matter protest and I saw people, like some people younger than me, some people like just older than me, and they were like breaking down into tears over their stories. Stuff that, you know, they've experienced, and then I was like, this isn't something which isn't affecting a lot of people. It's affecting everyone. It's affecting all
Everyone.
Black people, all mixed people, all people who are not white essentially.
Yeah.
It's affecting them. Like it's affecting Black lives. We're being killed. We're being, you know, sort of, we're being like stopped for no reason in stop and searches. We're being, you know, villainized consistently. I mean, the color black itself, like as we were talking about earlier, is a villainized color. Like black means like white has been seen as pure peace and everything. Black has been seen as tainted darkness and, you know, impure. So it's just something that, you know, I think.
You know, also you're seeing a lot of amazing things online where the cop stops you and he says, no, I'm not being racist or anything, but according to the reports we get, people of your color are doing these and these crimes. So because you're driving such a nice car in this neighborhood, we have to question if it actually belongs to you. Things like that. I mean, it's crazy how bad things have gotten and how bad things were until now, where we're highlighting these things.
But like even when you look at it, like protests have happened before about Black lives, like about how police brutality is wrong, about this and that. So once we protest, and we're protesting now, and once they, like, you know, send a few cops to jail and say, oh, we're gonna crack down on institutionalized racism, like, to what point is that actually going to change, you know, anything? Like, what actually has to be done to effect change beyond protests? Because protests can only take you so far.
Can I say something on this? Just saying, like, you know, you talk about this, like, if you, well, I'll use a bit of a weird term, but like a hydra is a headed, like a 9-10 headed monster, which if you cut off one head, grows back 2 more, and you have to like burn it at the roots. So that's the exact same thing with the police. You can crack down, do all that, but the police itself, the institution, is founded in racism. We have to burn the roots and we have to rebuild. Like, abolishing the police is never about making sure there's no police, taking the police completely off the streets, you know, and all that. It's about restructuring the police so they don't breed these racist rogue cops. You know, we all know that there's a lot of good cops, and we appreciate the ones who do their job and like follow it properly and don't step out of line. But it's the ones that are obviously bred by the police system and the policing, I don't know whether it's recruitment or training, that we need to stop at the roots. So we need to relook at how the police is built, and maybe even other institutions that breed racism, how that is built, and we need to cut it off at the roots.
I actually just want to ask a question about like I don't know if you guys know a lot about it, but like the whole defund the police movement that's going on in America, where they want to completely defund the police. I like personally, I think that I agree with what you're saying, Taku, that they definitely need to totally like relook at the system and almost start anew. But I don't necessarily believe that stopping them from receiving funds is gonna you're gonna help that, because I think that if anything, it's gonna create almost a greater hate towards the community that it's got the whole thing going, and the whole defund, like I don't know, the idea of it that started the whole thing. If anything, it would make it worse for certain communities, not make it better for them. So,
See,
I don't
but
know.
Your Marcus. The
The-
defund the police is not necessarily like just stop. It's not like
take
stop
the
giving money, but
But
just
defund,
keep
that's
them.
what defund means, and I agree with what you're saying. I think they should cut a lot of finances, but defund means stop any. I think it means stop any finances, like stop
No,
them.
no. If
no,
you
that's
use
that's
a
not
lot
the
of
context we're
money,
using it in.
that's defunding is like
That's what it means.
money that's been flooded from taxpayers' money into the police, and then redirecting these funds to different like places that actually need the thing, like healthcare, education, all these sort of sectors that need help, like children in country in student what children in states aren't getting enough food during lunch. Yeah, like that. If you see their plates of online, you can see they have like 3 baby carrots and that's it. But then the police have like entire riot gears and they're misusing this. So you see, there's like a lack of level
Land.
between the
Because it's
different funding.
because it's been militarized and it's become a whole industry, like not just the police but the whole corrections thing, from the police to the prisons. Those two, you can't talk about one without the other, because
Rehabilitation.
the police are putting basically in America, what the thing is that most prisons are privately owned, so they take out contracts from the government for a certain amount of money and for a certain amount of time. And by the time that contract is being taken, you don't even have to provide the service anymore. So you don't have to take care of your prisoners. You're just getting the money. And so what the police's job is to keep the prisons full. So once you keep the prisons full, then everyone's getting their share. And already the police are militarized and all this, and it's basically private corporations making money at the end of the day.
Correct. I just wanted to add on and say, actually, no, I've forgotten what I was going to say. Forgive me.
But I think we're also putting too much focus on defunding the police, while we also have to hold judges accountable.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's the judges that set the sentence for these long prison terms, and making sure that, a country that has like 13% black people have like 70% of the jails filled with black people. So this way of pushing people from, just selling drugs like at a low income and then doing 10 years and pushing them into this prison system where you see people who are raping girls, like white people raping girls behind dumpsters and sentenced to 6 months. So this system of judges, like, incorrectly putting people's terms like longer than they should be or shorter than they need to be is
That's
also something we need to address.
That's why I don't believe we need to only stop at defunding and refiguring the police system. We need to look at the whole judicial system, the whole like justice system, starting with police officers, following on to judges, following on to correction officers, like you just said. That whole system seems to be a breeding ground for racism and prejudice towards black people. Black people who go to court for the same offenses as white people are getting harsher sentences. Like there was this thing I saw where four guys got arrested for the same thing. 3 of them were white, 1 of them was black. The bail was set at 200 for one, 300 for the other, 400 for it's actually I think it was 200, 250, 350, 450. Then the black guy's bail was 600. Like I don't know how you determine all of this and where you can get booked for the same offense and someone else, or like just because of the color of your skin, you can be like, I don't know, alienated and like called out and just discriminated against because of your color.
Well, what I was going to add, and thank you, Nyamu and Taku, for bringing that point, is what I was going to say is the democratic government of the US is meant to be a system of checks and balances. There are three main arms: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. So in a whole point, each arm has failed to support the other one, because you're talking about judges and police and prisons, but there's no legislation that is stopping the judge from setting whatever bail price he wants for whatever person of color or person he favors. There's no legislation in place that protects people from setting a general jail term or something like that. So in a way, the whole system is corrupted, and I think they need to look at it. They need to step back and restructure everything in place, because the checks and balances clearly aren't working for anyone's favor.
Yeah,
For the
that's
people's
when,
favor.
that's when, for example, I look at a system like, for example, in any European country, like the UK, where there's some sort of institutionalized racism. And I look at it and I'm like, to at what point are protests going to make the people who have been benefiting from this system say, okay, we're going to change it? So I feel like now it's up to the minorities themselves, so the Black people, the Latinos in the US and the UK, to take it upon themselves to infiltrate these systems. Because I don't think it's realistic to assume that they're going to change the system. So I think at the end of the day, you just have to work with what you have. So if they're able to infiltrate the system, then they can call out when someone is being racially biased or being racist or doing this and this, if you have a big enough representation. So I feel like it's up to now the people, since people are aware of it, people who are now going into jobs and careers and all of this, it's their like responsibility to infiltrate like the higher positions, because that's the only way I feel like change will be affected. Otherwise, it's just going to be protests, protests, protests. Then few changes are made, but overall, it's the same system.
But we're focused on the US and the Europe a bit, but we also have racism within our own country. Like, if you go anywhere, like, like Jay's bar, where you hear guys are racially discriminated against, like Black people who have like unfair service compared to white people, like my own cousin was telling me. So I think it's quite an issue if our own people are discriminating against our own people. Like, that's much more serious. If like Marcus is being discriminated against us, that's one thing. But if Mwai is going by with himself as a Black person, is discriminating against me as another fellow Black person, I think that's a very huge issue, and it hinders our progress as a Black race.
And it's disguised as tip culture. That's what they say. They look at them and they say, yeah, they'll provide better tips than this guy.
Yeah, no one can say it's like, it's racial preference, because you have to be politically correct. But like, even an example I'll give is I don't know, there's a steak restaurant in Village Market, right? And some time ago, I was going to the restaurant, and like, obviously it stood out to me. Personally, I wasn't affected, but like I thought about like the smartness of the marketing, because the guy, the way there's usually like now, like you said, the server at the front who like, gives you menus and like sees you to your table. The guy at the front was actually white. And like, even though that's not like a norm in Kenya, but the fact that like I even thought about, oh, that's unusual. Then I was like, even me myself, I was like, doesn't this guy like higher paying job. Like, why is he doing this? And even the organization themselves thought if we put a white person there, the restaurant will be seen as like, you know, more upper class, more professional, this and that. So I think it's just up to everyone to realize, like, you know, little things like that, like to realize how heavily affected you are by like media and all of this, and like to come out of it yourself, because no one else can take you out. Also, Sean, we wanted to talk to you about basically the segregation of races in Kenya and also tribes, and like how that's mainly caused by colonialism, but how it continues to this day and why.
And someone's also asking about the police brutality in Kenya. So if you can touch on both topics, that would be good.
Sean, why don't you start us off, Sean K, about police brutality?
Yeah.
No, I'll give it to Sean A.
My God, how many Sean's are in this conversation? All right. What do I touch on first? Police brutality in Kenya.
Yeah.
Well, what I've seen, there's a certain way that's been instilled in them that if you make a person fear you, you have control over them. And the way the police, the army, the GSU, the way they approach the lower class people, thinking that they don't have a voice, thinking that because they are armed, they have power over these people. They can do whatever they want with them. Is quite, it's terrible. But I really, the thing is, I have very strong views on it, but I don't want to polarize the entire police force, because I have seen cases where they're extraordinarily good police people who help the poor, who empower the poor, who protect the poor. And I've seen cases where a guy just walks in with a rungu to a bar and he smashes everything. He doesn't care. He beats people down to the ground. He's kicking someone's head in until they're breaking skulls. I think it's the fault of the Inspector General, in the sense that he's not controlling his men. He's not telling them that this is wrong, and this is being seen not only by Kenyans but the international community. But I really don't want to touch this topic because it's a bit difficult for me to talk about it.
Sort of
Yeah.
just touch on.
I'll say something. In Kenya, it's not a case of, okay, sometimes it's a case of race, but mostly it's a case of class, in that, of course, the poor people are the oppressed in this case. And it's crazy to see that humans just like to point out the differences rather than the similarities between them, you know? So, like, in these cases, when you see someone getting beaten down in the street just for walking at 7 o'clock at night, 7:01, and you get shot, you're not even apprehended, you're shot. So you see, this type of mentality, it's like the other Sean said, it's hard to talk about, it is, because you just have so many, it comes with emotions as well, so it's a bit hard to talk about. But to see all people in their own houses getting shot down, you know, it's crazy.
That's the toughest one. That's the toughest one that really got to me was there was a kid hanging out on his balcony with his mom. 7 or 2, 7, I don't care. The cop pointed them out. The mom is trying to tell her kid, get down, let's go in the house. Not even 20 seconds, the kid has been shot. What the hell is wrong with that, man? You see, this is why it makes me very emotional.
A very emotional topic.
Yeah.
I think Sean had said that it's the job of the Inspector General to, you know, like put his men in order, but I forget his exact name, but he was being interviewed on KTN a few weeks back, and he said he was essentially, I think he was just making excuses for his men. He said, you know, they're young, they're excitable, it's not their fault when they do this and this. But like, even if I'm looking at the Inspector General, I don't want to blame the Inspector General, because if you look at the issue itself, where it stemmed from was, if you look at the history of Kenya, when Kenya first got a police force, it was like to eliminate the Mau Mau. So Black people were like trained to hunt, or, you know, the Mau Mau who appear as rough, they have beards and they have dreads and this and this. Then now, once we got freedom, you know, the police force, like, it wasn't re-looked at, it wasn't like reformed. Police weren't fired and new ones were hired. They just continued, like, you know. So I feel like it's just something it's a culture that was instilled in them from that time, and it's just never changed because it's like part of the organization itself. So now obviously it switched from protecting white people and you know, apprehending the Mau Mau, to now protecting the rich and apprehending the poor.
But also, why, let me add on to that, is that our police force is very poorly funded. Their salary is pretty low. And in their ranks, this is also the mistake, I should not have mentioned the IG, but in their ranks, they have several cartels where they collect money in certain ways. I'm going to sound like someone who's wearing a tinfoil hat, but there's a lot of they take bribes and stuff and they collect it in their own cartels, and they have ways of cleaning that money. They own matatus, and they have connections with the matatus, the Mungiki, and all that stuff. So you'll find that they also, creating instability for them is business. So when they come and destroy property and beat up people, in a way they're creating business for themselves, because they will be back there in charge of keeping the peace, in charge of rebuilding the infrastructure or somewhat. It's a whole cartelish system, and I think that also plays into police brutality in Kenya. But that's my conspiracy thinking, so it's not for sure known.
But beyond misconduct, beyond like brutality, because that's unacceptable, the misconduct you see from police in Kenya, like, you know, accepting bribes, like, you know, inciting bribes, all of this, you have to look at it and you have to ask, like, to what extent can they be blamed? Because in a capitalist society, it's essentially every man for themselves. Like, they'll get their salary, but once they get that salary, it's enough to sustain them for maybe half, 3/4 of a month. Then they, obviously, if they have the opportunity to get that extra bit, then they're gonna take it. So you have to like look at in what way can you create like a fair system in which everyone feels like the work they do is justly gratified and like rewarded. And also now talking about the segregation that's resulted as an effect of colonialism. Sure.
Well, I was having a discussion with my sister earlier about this. When the colonialists settled here in Kenya, they had tribes that collaborated with them and tribes that went against them. And you can also see like how they settled people into like provinces and stuff. It's created a sort of attrition that still remains today, because you're looking at now how tribes are conflicting with each other in this country, how tribes are drawn whenever elections come. You have to have certain tribes backing you in order to win. What I was going to say is these things, in my view, were created by colonialists not only when they were here, but even after they left. Like, yeah, that's one point I was going to say. It'll come back to me when I get it. Has anyone got anything else to add about tribalism?
I think Nyamu had a point, now going back to police brutality.
Yeah, my point was more on police brutality. Okay, so police also links back to like politicians and how the system in Kenya is failing everyone that's a part of it. So police and politicians are basically civil servants, so they're there to serve the people. However, there's this mentality that's been driven, I think, from like colonialism, like as a pass down, that they are now above the citizens, but to a certain extent. So for police, when it comes to stories of like classism, it's like they serve the upper classes. So that's why they're much more respectful. That's why, like, if you're driving a nice car, then they are less likely to stop you. They're less likely to frisk you down, all this sort of stuff. When it comes to like lower class people, it's not so much as they're there to serve you, but they're there to, they can abuse you now because they're not really there, like they're above you. And this is the same thing for politicians. In Kenya, we glorify politicians. Like, I don't know if you guys saw, but when there was like a South African member of parliament that came to Kenya. And he was so shocked because the member of parliament here in Kenya had a driver, they were driven to work, they had all the bodyguards, and they had all these nice things. And this is just like glorified politicians to a point where they don't even serve the people, they begin to serve themselves. The same thing with Babu, when he shot DJ Evolve, and he hasn't been charged. And the man is still walking free and he's still teaching, I don't know, classes on IG. And it's shocking because this guy nearly took one person's life. Yeah,
the crazy thing about that, is the guy that was shot, the DJ that was shot, he got his dad to say thank you to Babu Owino for apparently taking care of the medical bill after he shot his son. That was just crazy. The dad said thank you to his son's aggressor. That was crazy.
Like Mr. Destin has forced this into us. Like, politicians are not meant to be above. There's no Mr. Politician. No offense, but Uhuru Kenyatta is not meant to be Honorable Kenyatta. He's there to serve the ordinary people. If anything, about being above, in fact, he's below the people. He's there to serve us. So the fact that this mentality exists in Kenya, this allows police to act on, anyone's violent beliefs. Like, I don't know if you guys, but as humans, you have this like innate thing where you want to destroy everything. That's just me. But you want to destroy everything around you. Like, you have these outbursts of like anger and violence. And the police, when you become a police officer and you're glorified to this position, you allow yourself or people allow you to begin to abuse your power. So I think it's all about a change in mentality if we're to sort anything out. And then this ties into tribalism. I mean, I was reading, and before colonials came, tribes weren't necessarily like, it was more about like what you occupied yourself with. So like you'd be called like a Kikuyu, I think, if you're like a farmer, and that's just what you would do. That's like, that was your occupation, not necessarily like, oh, because we're born here, now we have the same bloodline, so you must be better than Kambas or something. So if we're able to start changing the mentality in every aspect of Kenyan society and start seeing that no one's just better than the other or no one is above the other, then you can finally sort out a lot of things in Kenya. So that's just my perspective on that.
No, what I wanted to say is the colonials, when they settled, they gave us different roles. Like you'd find, because Kabas and some Kikuyus collaborated with them, they would work in their houses. But then when the Mau Mau movement started, Kikuyus were less employable. You'd find Maasais would guard their cattle, would guard their properties, and all that whatnot. But when it came to independence, and around the time Jomo Kenyatta and Odinga had their feud, I think a lot of colonialists, a lot of white settlers and some British spies that remained, because there were some, took advantage of the situation and decided that if we encourage this tribal divide, then this country will not reach its full potential, which they were trying to suppress in many African countries. They didn't want us to reach a certain level where we were surpassing the great British Empire that still remained. I don't know what your take is on that, any of you.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with that point of the colonialists. What was so brilliant, like, about the way that Africa was infiltrated was that if they took you as a slave to the Americas, they taught you that you were less than, the white man, and you were there to work for the white man. But here in Africa, when they were laboring you, they taught you that your tribe is less than this tribe. So instead of looking at them as the enemy, as the aggressor, you're looking at this tribe and saying, oh, this tribe is treated better than me, is preferred to me. And like now you're working against each other. And obviously at the top of the pyramid is now the white people that colonized you, and they're not even affected by the tribal aggression that's now going to go on between you. So like, I feel like to an extent, the effects that the scramble for Africa and the slave trade had on Africa is worse than the effects it had on those in the US and in the foreign countries. Because the divide that was created is amongst people that are the same. So somehow we've managed to separate a people that were once together, and it still goes on till this day.
It created such an internal turmoil between Black people in Africa due to colonization that even to this day it still hasn't been fixed. The togetherness and harmony and peacefulness of the tribes is one about. After colonization ended, essentially was non-existent. They were all at war with each other, or a few would be at war. Tribes would have to choose sides and stuff like that. The it was such a brainwash that the British and those who colonized Africa achieved to a massive extent that they blamed each other more than they did the people who came in a way, and they came off way worse than, I don't know, at this point I believe the British or any of the colonizers ever can or ever could. Even if we were to try and hold them accountable or try and like uh just I guess hold them accountable.
There's a comment here that's talking about how, first of all, I agree that Black Lives Matter when all Black Lives matter. And like, obviously that's in reference to the trans, queer, and gay community, like the LGBTQ plus community, and how they're treated in Africa as a whole, and how they're treated in Kenya specifically. So I just wanted to ask Sean, like, what do you, what's your take on like, the the mentality of people towards the community in Africa and Kenya?
Oh, Sean, you're muted.
It's difficult because a lot of people are still of traditional beliefs and traditional ethics that they can't accept these people for what I believe that it's a natural occurrence. Like, these people are born this way. There's no right or wrong way about it, because humans are dynamic in that sense. But according to our president, it's not an issue of urgency. He thinks that we have more serious problems we should handle, instead of coming with ways of educating our already traditional people on how to be more accepting to other people. And it's a difficult affair, because not everyone can accept it, even after being educated about it. Yeah. Did I answer that properly?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good answer. I was just, yeah, sorry, Nyam, go ahead.
Oh, no, go.
Yeah, I was thinking it's kind of scary to think about it, because if you look at history, even before colonialists came, there are traces of homosexual relationships before they came. But for some reason, when they came and they brought the Bible to us, like the newly discovered Bible and all the writings and their white Jesus, and they brought it to us, they told us that homosexuality was wrong. And yet we have traces back to our human nature, or like back to our African past, showing that these relationships existed and that it was accepted, because you can't really start deciding who should people love. And I think that if we can't accept our own people in our own society just because of who they choose to love, I think it's incredibly backwards, to say the least.
That's exactly the point I was actually about to make.
Exactly.
Is like, the resistance against the LGBTQ plus community tribal beliefs, or is it as a result of colonialism? Because the way the colonialists came, they erased our history and then taught us how to live. So obviously, it's not easy to look back and see what we previously, like how we previously treated certain communities. But there's evidence that even in Central Africa, in the time of kingdoms, that lesbians and gays were seen as actually more wise, or like more, how do I say? Yeah, just basically like wiser and like, just above like the general norm. So it wasn't seen as something to like, be ashamed of. It was actually seen as something that like, if you were part of that community, then you were like, part of a special few that was treated, that had excelled above the social norm.
Well, why I wanted to just add on to your point, because think about it this way. Yes, they came with their religion, with their laws, with their practices, but they also practiced this amongst themselves. If you look at it, in colonial times, there was a thing called white mischief that I think even Black people used to say it a lot, because what they were practicing, not many of the locals could understand. There were things like wife swapping. There were things like men having relationships with men and women. There were things like men taking on Black women and having children with them but not supporting them, all that stuff. So it's just that to us, I think to us, because we're instilled so hard with the religion, Christianity, and those values, we can't overlook some acceptances of humanity. But if you look at Christianity in its own, there's some things that were taken out of the Bible. If you look at how the Bible was made, it was brought, the books were all brought together in a conference, and men decided which books would be in the Bible and which shouldn't be in the Bible. So if you look at it, some things have been left out, some things including homosexual relations and all that.
There was actually a post like I had seen like circulating on the internet it was basically in reference to the historical like writing of the Bible, and actually not even like that long ago, in the 1940s, the word pedophile was replaced with homosexual in the Bible, and that's like when the Bible decided that it was wrong to be gay. So it wasn't even in the original script.
It's not even only that, like during slave times and colonialist times, what people believe is that the white man wrote the Bible, but the white man didn't bring the whole Bible. They took out pages about uprising and freedom of choice, all these things that you have in the Bible, talking about every man is equal, blah, blah, blah. All that was taken out immediately to keep us controlled, to keep us taking in to keep them as the only source of information, Yeah. It was called the Black Bible. You can hear such stuff.
Someone asked a question about whether we think that our education system has failed us as young people in matters of African history and diversity.
Can I stop?
100%.
Can I stop?
Yeah, this is definitely one.
Yeah.
I think.
Because even in Kenya, with education, 844 system itself, there's nothing before colonialism. Everything is after colonialism. Mm-hmm. When you're learning anything, there's nothing defined before colonialism. Maybe
at least the 844 system, they teach Kenyan history. Us who went to private school, I've never sat in a class and been taught anything to do with Kenya or Africa.
Touch on that,
apart from the scramble for Africa, slavery. Then now we moved to the Americas. They taught us about how Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
Like with private schools, like even I think it's a problem there because with international private schools, especially, they don't teach the history they don't want people to know. They want to try and omit facts and omit their wrongdoings because they it's not because they it's mostly because they don't want to take accountability for their actions. They don't want to admit that they were wrong in this instance. They don't want to admit that this happened. But the fact of the matter is, we have to educate people, no matter how hard it may be, no matter like how much of a stressful topic it may be. You know, the people need to learn what they did. What they did was not right. Colonization and slavery were very big parts of African history, very big parts of British history. But these are stuff which are not taught.
But at the same time, colonization and the scramble for Africa isn't all African history.
Yeah.
It's a small segment. Like, we don't even,
African history always starts.
myself, sorry?
The African history always starts with the white man. Scramble for Africa started with colonialism, slavery, slave trade, started with kidnapping people from their homes, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. I find it very sad that we never learned about the Ashanti tribe, about Mansa Musa, the richest guy.
Hey, Mansa Musa.
We never learned about the Nubians who used to supply weapons to Egypt, and they, in fact, probably taught the Egyptians how to build pyramids, because if you look at it, Sudan has more pyramids than Egypt. We never learned about the migrations. Like, look at Kenya, where we come from 3 ethnicities, basically. There's the Bantus, there's the Nilotes, there's the Kushites. We're not taught about that. We're not taught about all the African gods that we used to believe in. Like, look at Kikuyu culture. There was Guy, and then there was, who's the man? Is it Kamau or something? And Jockey. And then they had kids.
It was Muigai.
Yeah?
Muigai.
Yeah, you see, that one is still unfamiliar to me. And the class systems that we have and all that. We've lost our culture, and also we're victims to the propaganda. As Taku was saying, they're trying to make their history beautiful, but that's all propaganda. And you think propaganda is dead because World War II ended and the Cold War ended, but no, we're still being victims to propaganda and the false truths that they want to.
It might not be
cleanse
pleasant.
us.
It might not be pleasant to teach all of this in school to children. You might not think that, you know, these children can particularly handle it, but because it's such an integral part of British history and the amount of people that it affected is like as I was saying before, it's not just British people, it's not just African colonies. You know, India, other different colonies in different areas, they were also affected. They need to teach how, you know, this great British Empire that they call was essentially just them coming to lands and conquering them and trying to, you know, take advantage of less civilized, advanced cultures and advanced people, which is an integral part. Like I think everyone would be very interested to learn exactly what happened. Like, I was talking to a couple of my friends on a FaceTime, as I said, I was talking about this earlier. Like, they were talking about how one of a student they went to school with, whose dad lost most of his side of the family to the Rwandan genocide. He came to the school and he talked about it, and he talked about the Rwandan genocide, talked about his family, and she said like she was in tears, and everyone else who was listening was absolutely like their heart had just sank. They were just so upset. But that's she said, no matter how distressing this might have been, like, it will always stick with me. It is something that will always stick with me. It's a learning point, something that I needed to hear, something that opened up my ears. That's what teaching slavery will be like. People will finally, they need to hear this. People will finally understand. It might be the eye opener that someone needs. It might be that push that, you know, restructures our society. It might be that push towards, you know, fighting racism and fighting all of this, knowing what they did, knowing your history. Because in schools that like I go to a British school, we are taught a watered down white, like washed, British, very British, like supportive history. Like we rarely learn about the failures of Britain, which I think is a complete failure of the system, complete failure of education.
Just to add on to that, and a lot of private schools use the excuse that, for example, Buffoni, I remember, it's not in the syllabus. But regardless of whether it's in the syllabus or not, like especially when you're at a young age, they could have easily taught us about something outside of the syllabus, or even other perspectives within the syllabus. Like in history class, for example, you can have so many perspectives on any like topic but they don't need to teach specific topics and specific views on the topic. They wouldn't necessarily show you what it was like to, well, I guess they would show what it's like to be a slave, but they wouldn't show all the different like tribes you were talking about. They wouldn't show the culture. They just show the white man's perspective of it, and as much as it influenced maybe British society, not really Africa or Kenya, and specifically for us. So
Nyamu, you had
So,
something
did
to
you want to say something?
Shonan,
Was it
yeah,
Sean? Sean, you wanted to say something, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna emphasize on the point that every time Africa is brought up in our school system, it's just about, them being conquered and everything, but they never really talk about how we were one of the most thriving societies on the planet, probably the most. As Africa, we were like one community. We used to transport materials up and down the river. There was a system working throughout, the whole continent, and they just never point out these things when we talk about the history.
I think like both Marcus and Taku said that, they might not feel comfortable or they might be scared teaching these topics, but I think that's just cowardice because we learn about the bubonic plague and how these guys are growing warts, and we learned about the Crusades, how the Christians went all the way and tried to unrightly kill the Muslims. So it's not about being sensitive, it's about like trying to condition us to a certain extent. And then you can also look at the part of, okay, I've forgotten, but I'll come back to it. It was a good point, I hope.
Well, just to add on, we all say knowledge is power, but one thing I try and live my life by is to be honest. And I find that it's always best to live the ugly truth than a beautiful lie. And in the sense that you don't want to try and put yourself in the best light by being perfect, because nobody is perfect. There are always mistakes along the way, or things that have been done by your ancestors that are frowned upon or just unacceptable. We still need to know that. And the best thing is to empower people with certain knowledge so that we don't repeat these mistakes again in a new form. And I think honest education is necessary in that sense.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Marcus mentioned about syllabuses like in primary school, but syllabuses in primary school don't really matter. Like in primary school, all you need to learn is really like read, write, and count numbers. But the rest, like history, you don't need to learn. I didn't need to learn about Henry the Eighth and his six or how many other wives. What I needed to learn is about like my African brothers and sisters. Because if you think about it, we're having a discussion with this, like with Sean K. And how many African scientists do you guys know? Like no one really knows an African scientist here or like an Arabic scientist, but we know Isaac Newton and all this history about all these people. Even though it's not necessarily useful to us, and these people made a huge contribution, and there are people exactly like us. We never learn about it. So I think that's just another failing of our system. And it's just being scared of exposing us to our own history and like allowing us to benefit from our ancestors by saying, oh, it's not part of the syllabus, or it's too gruesome, or we don't understand it, all that stuff. It's just running away from the actual issues at hand. And if through that history repeats itself, we can gain a lot if we're able to understand our history and benefit from it.
With what Nyonu said, I think with education in the education system is that if you don't ask questions beyond it and don't try to find things, if you get satisfied and you get content with it, then that's where you run the risk of getting indoctrinated and your mindset is controlled by the curriculum, like you're taught what to think, you whatever, and that's how you always think the rest of your life, unless you start asking those questions of your teachers, of just everything of what you're learning in general. You can't just take everything for what it is.
I'll just sort of add to this. Something that I want to touch on like 2 points is the first point being how at these young ages when they taught me about Henry VIII and all that, and the War of the Roses and stuff like that. These are the times they could have taught us about colonization and slavery and stuff like that. Because even though like we're kids, this is the time where it sticks with you. Like I remember most of the stuff I learned while doing Henry VIII. I remember most of that, but instead of using these times to teach us something that is useful, they spend it to, almost boost British culture, boost their, standing, show them off as good. Like when they're teaching the war, the way that I feel like the war is taught is they start with Britain as the underdogs. They go into Britain being, like this force which was meant to lose. They go to their lowest point and then they rise up like it's some sort of superhero. Like they romanticize winning the war. They make it seem like it was. They make it like obviously it's amazing and this was a war for freedom, a war for the whole country, a war for freedom. But like they value when they seem to be losing and then win more than teaching the accuracy of like what actually happened and like the accuracy of their history, their roots, where they come from, because they fear. I think the country as a whole fear being looked at in an evil way, such as such as Germany essentially, and Hitler. Like Hitler is something that we cannot forget because it is consistently taught to us. Like Hitler is an important part of history. He is a really bad part of history, but he is taught because it shows the British is amazing. Whereas slavery, the British played an immense role in slavery. They were one of the core people in slavery, but they won't teach it because they're bad. They're bad in the story and the actual like telling of it. There's no way you can spin it so the British come off well. So they refuse to teach it to us at a young age, which it's sad because it's something that I think people would love to hear about and love to be educated on.
Yeah, even going off, Taku mentioned Hitler, yeah, and I feel like it's up to everyone themselves to like educate yourself, because even until recently, I didn't know about, like I had heard about King Leopold, but I didn't know what he did. But as much as the Holocaust was a terrible event, King Leopold killed maybe 3, 4, 5 times the amount of people that were killed in the Holocaust. Yet it's not something you necessarily learn about. So I feel like, as Sean said, you have to look beyond your own educational system, and then you also have to look beyond like the beliefs you are brought up with. Because like even me personally, Christianity, for example, I look like a hypocrite, but I'm just wearing this chain because it's cool. Like it just looks cool. Like if you actually look at it, because Sean made it very clear that there were gods before Christianity, like Africans had gods, but like how many people know about them? I have no idea who, like the story of God and the Bible and all of this before colonization. So like you just have to make a conscious effort to change it. Like me, for example, I believe in God, but like when I pray in English, but I make a conscious effort to end the prayer in Kiswahili, to like to say God in Kiswahili and not like God in English. Like, you have to like decolonize as scary as it is, you have to decolonize everything you believe in order to like properly have pride in like who you are.
Why to sort of like continue on that point, like as you're saying earlier, for those who were here at the beginning of the stream, Mwai was talking about Trevor Noah, and I believe this is where I'm getting it from. Like his mother said to him, "Pray in English," or was it? I don't know. I don't know. That might have not been Trevor Noah, something else. But someone said,
Because she said that prayers in English
yeah,
are answered first,
yeah,
followed by prayers in tribal languages.
because they're trying to shame. They're trying to shame. Is this whole brainwash event yet again? They're brainwashed into believing that their own languages, like how we used to communicate to each other, our basic form of communication with each other is it's it's second to English, it's second to what they are, it's second to what they speak. It's this whole inferiority complex that they've developed into black people, that they are inferior to them. And it it's it's heartbreaking and shocking to hear stories like this, because you know that they're not the only one. You know there's more. You know, if as I encourage people, everyone listening right now, if you educate yourself, if you look out, there are stories which are far worse. There are stories which are, far more impactful, and it's tragic to just know that these issues which you find horrible to one person is happening to thousands or 100,000 millions of people around the world. It, that should, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like before people can start truly like advocating for Black progress and Black Lives Matter, they have to first of all themselves understand what it means to like be Black, what it means to be African. And since our educational system fails to teach us that, you just have to look at it for yourself and like understand the history, and like as much as the history is complex and you might question your current beliefs, you just have to take your own interpretation of it, but you have to look at it. Like you have to know in order to truly take pride in like what you are.
As a sort of segue here, a smart little segue here, as we're talking about education, we have a donation link in the bio for the charity called the Black Curriculum, where they work to try and get curriculums changed to teach Black history, to teach about colonization and stuff like that, to get it taught more in schools. So that's what we're trying to raise money for here today. If you don't see the link, refresh your stream and it should appear. I've updated it. Donate anything, nothing's too little. It's for a great cause. I'd like to thank everyone who's donated. We see your donations. We'll probably try and read out the ones we've missed after this. Thank you.
I think we should. Okay, there was a question about the role of women in society and how that same society treats women, and how can we uplift ourselves as Black people when we don't respect and uplift our own women. So what are you guys' views on that? Why? No, Sean.
Essentially, men are trash movement is what you're talking about, right?
Not necessarily men are trash. Men are trash is for women in general. We're trying to focus on our women.
Like African queens.
Yes.
Can I just say something quickly before we start the discussion? In the way that society is structured, according to first of all, your religion, your skin color, and your socioeconomic class, you either have certain privileges or you're discriminated against. So obviously, the pinnacle is being a white Christian man. Second is a white Christian woman. Then obviously under that, you have now Middle Easterns, all of this. And if you just go down the list, there's Black people, and then there's Black men. And then even below that, there's Black women. So I feel like beyond even how Black people are treated in society, the people that have it the roughest and the people that need to be uplifted by both Black men and uplift themselves as Black women is Black women.
Can we also use this as a point to talk about Breonna Taylor? If you guys know who she is, right? The American I think she's an EMT worker. Like she's like a paramedic who the police came to her house and they let off 27 shots and 8 of them hit her, killing her. And it turned out that the suspect the police were looking for was actually in prison and they shouldn't have been there. And so she lost her life to, a policing error, and the policemen who killed her are still walking free. Like in recent, I think I just saw a thing saying Breonna's law was passed. I don't know, I can't remember which state it was, but Breonna's law, which eliminates no-knock warrants, which is what happened, which is what led to her arrest, where policemen don't have to knock before they enter household. They can just go straight in and barge straight in. So due to like them barging in and coming straight in and not assessing it or not being able to do anything, they would have probably answered the door if they had knocked instead of just barging in, shooting her and killing her. But it's people like these, like we also need to say Black women's name. As much as we shout George Floyd, we need to be shouting Black women's name like Breonna Taylor, because they are also being affected. We can't leave them out of this. We as Black men, we need to protect and uplift and put our Black women on a pedestal. We need to make sure that they're being, we can assist them in any way possible. We need to make sure that they are fighting this fight alongside us. We need to make sure that they know they're not fighting alone for Black women's rights. They need to know that we are fighting alongside them, and I think that's important to say now.
There was also a question about colorism within Black societies. Like, Black people vary from lighter shades to darker shades. So do you think colorism extends to people being preferential towards the types of Black people that they like? Like, being more attracted to light skins, or being more attracted to light skins than darker skins. And I think, like, if I was to add my own point of view, I think that's also something we have to get rid of if we're truly to uplift Black women, like Taku said. Like, we can't have people forcing, saying, oh, you're pretty for a darker girl, or you're pretty for a blacker girl, things like that. Or saying, oh, because you're light skinned, that only makes you much more finer. So things like that, those are things that we have to raise within our own community. And it's not like it's far away. Like, it's our own friends. Like, it's our own friends having these beliefs. Oh, she's light skinned, so she's finer. Or no. Oh, that girl is dark. I don't know what. And I think these are issues that we actually have to start stepping up.
Yeah, we need to normalize speaking out.
Because I can't lie, I haven't stood up in every opportunity that I could have, and I think we have to start. Because if we start early, or if not early, but if we can start eliminating these issues. So at least once we're old and we start being in positions of leadership, that these problems don't trickle down into our children's lives, and we can start eliminating this process of colorism within our own society and judging others and people calling each other dark. Like, I'm dark, but people are darker than me. Then I'm going in them and telling them, oh, you're so dark, you're like under the bed and all that other stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that we really have to correct if we're to start.
It's this whole divide and conquer method used by colonizers, divide them, make them turn against each other, use this terminology, which has been integral in our roots as Black people. Sadly, it's become such a norm to put down another Black person. Instead of seeing a Black person succeed and being happy for them or trying to further their success, we will criticize them. We'll find a way to criticize them. No matter what, we'll find a way. We'll be like, oh, but blah 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 blah, this that. Instead of being like, they've done well, they've made it, they've done this, they've worked so hard for this. Instead, we'll be like, they didn't deserve this. They did this and this to not deserve it. It's such a prominent issue in our culture and between Black people that needs to be solved.
Yeah. What I didn't realize until recently is that so much racism and colorism and all of these things are watered down into things into general words. So like, for example, something that I saw the other day when I was like scrolling through my social media, and this is why guys need to follow like guys that think, you know, don't just be following these meme pages. I was watching my friend's story. In fact, I'm just gonna say the name because Larissa has been supporting. Shout out
Yeah,
Larissa.
Larissa. We see you, Larissa.
Out of Larissa, bro.
But
This is
basically,
the clap. This is the clap.
Larissa was on her Instagram, and I had never thought about it. I had never thought about it like this. But she was basically explaining the whole thing of types. So like obviously people are like, oh, you know, I like my type is just white girls. Like my type is just, you know, 0.5s. Like my type is just Arabs, you know, all of this. And if you look at it, when someone says, oh, they're not my type, but like, you know, black girls aren't my type, and you really look at it, what do black women have in common? Because the narrative that all black women are loud, all black women are, you know, aggressive or controlling, it's not true. Because like every black woman is like, you know, like their own human being, and like they're diverse, and like, you know, they're their own people. So if you're looking at it, the whole idea of types is driven by racism. Because the only thing all black women, and I'm quoting Larissa like directly on this, the only thing all black women have in common is their skin color. So what don't you like? You don't like their skin color.
It's
And
like
it's not your fault necessarily, but you also have to look at yourself and say, oh, okay, maybe I was influenced by, you know, what I see on TV. Maybe I was influenced by what my friends say, but you have to look at yourself and like, you know, like actually make a conscious effort to recognize these like injustices that have like crept into normality.
you know how we talk about how we talk about how we don't like being categorized as the typical stereotypical black guy. But whenever it comes to picking our types or like saying that you have this type and this type, we seem to be okay with putting down women and black women, which I don't understand. Where if it's directly affecting us, we immediately are the ones to start advocating and talking out. But as soon as we start doing it to other people and women, we think it's fine. Mostly women will fall under this category. There's a norm for men and there's a norm for women, and there is a massive difference between the norms, which often lead to women being um, well, coming out lesser or more discrimination towards women. So this whole thing like of types and this, we need to also be fighting this. We also need to be fighting alongside women, alongside black women, alongside all these women being typed on just because of the racial stereotypes that came about due to, well, for African people, slavery and colonization. These are where these things came along because people were so jealous of black women and black people that they had to categorize them as something which they um, decided was inferior, decided was unjust, decided was a crime. So that's why we're labeled. Back then we're labeled apes, monkeys, and all that. And now we're labeled, gangbangers, criminals, and everything like that. It's different words, but it's the same thing. You're trying to put us down because of our skin color, and when it comes to women being put down, we don't seem to fight, even though it's the exact same thing. We don't seem to fight. We seem to join in, participate, or stand silent, which is something we need to change.
So I just wanna. Oh, sorry, Sean, you had something to say?
Well, Moy, I just wanted to add on and say the whole thing about my type and whatnot. Men are generally attracted to visual things more than other things come into play. And what I found growing up, I don't know if it's affected you guys, but what I found growing up, and I'm trying to say this very delicately and respectfully, is that white girls dressed less conservatively than the black girls. So of course it led to certain weaknesses and misdirections. And if you're exposed to if you're in a school where you're exposed to certain things, or even what you see on TV, basically, it it can make you miss a few better qualities than what you generally should be looking at. And that's what advertisers do to you nowadays. Is there's a common saying that sex sells. So anything of a sexual nature or even minutely perverse, it brings the audience straight in, and it's a bad influence that's affected many people.
I think, sorry, I just want to divert slightly because the topic of women and Black women specifically and how they're treated, I think is very vast, and I don't think we can properly talk about it here. So I would suggest that like later on we'll have another segment and we'll invite a few Black women, and then we'll properly discuss. We'll go into that topic further later.
Why? Later I'm trying to. It might be later, it might be tomorrow. Looking at the timing, I'm trying to get my mom and a couple of Black moms on. They talk about the struggles they face as like raising Black boys. The so-called talk that every Black man receives and woman. Life is going to be hard for you because of your struggles. You have to fight twice as hard, and fail. You'll probably fail twice as much.
Yeah.
So this whole thing, we will as much as I love the conversation going, we are not experts in this. We have no.
Yeah, I think the conversation is too diverse, and we're not in a position to properly discuss it. We need to, we need to get representatives that can
probably. White people can't really relate to us is the same way we can't really relate to another struggle of women.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like just a quick.
We'll announce it on the Instagram page later. We'll get women we'll get different women to come and now discuss that further in depth. But something I wanted to talk about, especially with you, Sean, is the idea of Black people and the way they're presented in a professional setting. So, for example, this is something that's always pissed me off. Like, this is one thing beyond.
I remember talking about this with you, Moi. I remember talking about this.
Yeah, me and Sean always have these discussions. But something that's always pissed me off is the fact that I can't properly express myself the way I want to appear. And like, for example, I'll give an example. Like when I was younger, I wanted to have a hairstyle like Usher and these guys. And the Usher had that line over here, yeah? But like when I was younger, you were told you have to be shaved bald because it's presentable, because you can't go to school with a rough hairstyle. But beyond like laughing, what actually is the notion of a rough hairstyle? Like, what is the idea of some hairstyles being professional and some hairstyles being unprofessional? And like, when you look at it, the unprofessional hairstyles are all racially charged, because all professional hairstyles for Black men, Black women for Black men, it's short and it's, separated, not kinky. And for Black women, it's like, braided very neatly, not dreads, not cornrows, all of this. And like, I want to tell a short story. I was talking to like one of my friends the other day, and she was telling me about how in her school, there was this Black girl, and in the rule book, it said that hair should be well kept and, like tidy. So the Black girl, she got braids that were like of a certain like length, but they were well kept, like, all of that, like they weren't dyed, nothing like that. But she was told she had to remove them. And like, basically the argument was, my natural hairstyles are considered like, untidy and all of this, yet not to like racially like separate people, but yet there's some white girls that come to school, they haven't like combed their hair, Like they haven't done this and this, but they're not told anything. So like Sean, I wanted to talk to you because like, you know, you specifically, you take like pride in like, you know, displaying yourself as you want to. So I just want to say like, I wanted to ask you like what you think about that.
Well, I've also faced that thing where like because I have dreadlocks, I cannot work in an office, or there are some companies that did not want to work with me because my dreadlocks do not fall under their brand values, because my apparently dreadlocks are associated with people who do drugs, or people who related in gang violence, or some stuff like that. But in the sense also that a lot, there's the whole stereotype of dreadlocks being filthy, and even in general, like people with afro hairstyles, because it's not properly patted down or shaped well, to the like I remember in school, if your hair was a certain length, the teacher believed that you'd spend too much time looking after your hair, and not too much enough time in your books and stuff. And I mean, the thing is, they would try and push you away from what is yours into something that is generally good for everyone. And that made me really want to rebel with my own hairstyle. I remember having a conversation with my mom saying I want dreadlocks, and she said, when you're 18 you can have whatever you want. And I was like, I'm going to show people that dreadlocks are not filthy. Dreadlocks are not worn by only characters who do certain drugs and crime and all that. And dreadlocks can be part of a normal everyday life, and you can make a living off anything if you have dreadlocks. Like I was trying to normalize African hairstyles. But it's still a struggle because a lot of people still can't accept that fact that if you have messy hair, it's not ideal. Messy looking hair, not that it is messy in general.
Well, here in the UK, I think this dreadlock, you know, wearing like even wearing a do-rag and stuff, like the wearing stuff like that, you're immediately classed into, you know, gang member, shady, black guy, immediately. Just by like one feature of yourself can define you, and that to me speaks levels on what's going on. Like my sister, just sort of like derail a bit, but my sister was reading a article on black women and how and black hair, and how women were made to wear like turbans and stuff in slavery times just to cover up their hair because white women get so jealous of it because of its like versatility and stuff, and they would start to shame the black women because of their hair, because you know it was something different, it was something which they couldn't do. And then this whole idea of I was just reading the comment section of our YouTube thing, this whole idea of cultural appropriation comes in, and how people seem to love, well, as it was put, people seem to love black hairstyles and everything, but just not when they're on black people. Like that's the issue. Like why? How come a hairstyle on me can look unprofessional and make me look like a gangster, but as soon as you do it, something which is from my culture, it immediately turns into, you know, a good hairstyle, something professional, something cool. I I can't fathom that.
100%. And what I was thinking was also how it's so indoctrinated in even the black community itself. Like even a black person in Kenya won't employ you if you have dreadlocks, because why? There was even there was a case of police brutality with Minor, was it Samuel Minor? I forgot his They tell me in the comments. I forgot his name.
It's Samo Minor. And you know
Samuel
the
and his when he was assaulted by police, he wasn't the only one outside. When he was assaulted, he was in maybe a group of 5 to 6 people, dispersed and running and all of that, but he wasn't the only one there. So why was he then the one that was caught and brutally beaten by police? Because there's this perception that people with the dreadlocks are of a certain type. You know what I mean? And like, I feel like the only way to properly remove that prejudice is to have, like, you know, people like Sean entering careers with dreadlocks and prospering. And like, you know, now our generation, when we become the employers, having this information that, like, you know, appearance doesn't define a person's work ethic or their professionalism or like just their general, you know, benefit to the company or organization.
I think
There
this.
was a,
Sorry.
there was a good point. There was a good point made by Carla in the comments. She said, I feel that the versatility that comes with the African person, particularly regarding the hair, can be intimidating to someone unfamiliar with our texture, hence why they try to box us in. So does anyone want to comment on that?
I mean, she said it all. We are essentially, our hairstyles are fed, and we are fed because of how much we can change it, how different we can make it look. Which, like, even looking here, we have quite different hairstyles, all of us. Some of them quite similar, but all different in their own way. And like, I don't know. I guess. Well, actually just, you know, as she said it perfectly. She put it perfectly. But to sort of just like as a minor topic thing, what was I gonna say? I think the issue of our hairstyles defining who we are has evolved to our clothing now defines who we are. And as like, especially here in the UK, you know, you see people, if you see a black kid wearing trackies, like it's like a tracksuit from certain brands or something, they will be labeled as one thing. They'll be labeled as quite dodgy. You know, they might be running with the wrong crowd and stuff. Like this is especially like due to like younger generations, I'll say in the police, and that's why stop and search is such an issue, because of the clothing, like not like the complexion of their skin only, but also because this sort of way of dressing has been like, it's become so trendy in the black community, and like, well, I guess arguably like between people who are a bit like on the wrong side of the law, like a bit like gangbangers and stuff, they wear this certain way, and these kids, you know, they replicate what they see, and it's become a point where like, oh my, those guys are doing it, let me do it. So now because of this way that people dress, you know, we're being stopped and searched twice, 3 times more likely. So I feel like people feel the need, like black people, they feel the need due to all this gang violence and how they dress. They feel the need, some of them, to dress nicely when they go to these neighborhoods which have excessive gang violence, just to show themselves as not a part of this. Because the way a black person dresses has now become, you know, an area of prejudice and stereotyping.
Yeah, what Talk said is true, and like the main problem lies with the media. You know, these films, the Western films, always portraying the black guy as a thug with his pants sagging, with the do-rag on, or the dreadlocks, or whatever it is, and it's always, and the Tims. There's always Tims involved. Yeah, you know, that picture, you're just more likely to get shot in the back, you know. So also the film culture is very, very, very highly responsible for the way the black man is portrayed. Yeah, black Air Forces as well.
Especially in the UK, black Air Forces have now been, if you wear black Air Forces, you're now a gangbanger, someone who's tough and somebody who does this and that.
Obviously, it's the black Air Force, is not the white ones. No, no, no.
Ah, that's
But
another
again,
thing. That's another thing.
It's not white, it's not white. But I think this
No,
thing
it's-
of that what Taco and Sean K have mentioned, it really stems back from school. I mean, even in our school, guys can wear twists. For what reason? I don't know, it looks untidy, guys. Mr.
The
Distant feels
pony school. I'm
a
shouting
whole
about it.
school,
I don't
guys.
care. I don't care anymore, man. Guys need to get told as it is. Peponi school does not allow you black boys to wear their hair a certain length.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous because what? Even wearing earrings. Oh, you know, the parents will complain.
Don't
Parents
worry, I'll be the change you need, guys.
it goes against their beliefs. It's things like this. And even going back to the hairstyles, it's not only like, you know, Mr. Destin, who's a white person that feels it. Like, I remember I used to have dreadlocks when I was younger. When my shosho made my parents cut them off because she thought I was going to go and join the Mungiki. Like, that was her belief. Like, because I had dreadlocks, then my path at 6 years old to become a Mungiki just because I had dreadlocks. So that type of thinking is
That's so true.
I don't
Like,
know what to say. I even find it a bit funny because how is that your logical way of thinking?
even
Hey,
now,
bro, I had
when I
a big
saw,
thing as well.
Okay,
oh,
Sean.
even now when I saw my Jojo and she saw my dreadlocks, she was telling me I have to shave bald before I get my ID. Like how how can, how can you have such a belief, honestly?
Yeah, it's like well, I've just seen a comment just here with a question saying, as much as we discussed Blue Story a bit earlier, but as much as I enjoyed Blue Story, I do think that it somewhat glorified the rogue lifestyle or the gangster lifestyle, which I think will not help the perception of young people and young black people in London especially. I mean, I have an answer to this. Like, with Blue Story, I believe that Blue Story showed off the racism that is within the British system, because after a so-called alteration between two gangs at one of the cinemas they were showing it at in London, they stopped showing it completely, I think, or it was only like one cinema still showed it. And to me, if you look at the backstory, look in depth, these kids weren't even going to go see Blue Story. Apparently, they were going to go see Frozen 2. They were just a bunch of, I don't know, the media span it in a way that made me feel like they feel like black people can't tell the difference between reality and watching a movie. That by watching this movie, we're going to be immediately inspired to go into a gang life and gang business, because we've seen it here, and yes, they have glorified it, but the way that they've done it is also to inform. Like he says in the beginning of the movie, it's like let me show you what these boys are fighting for. Like let me show you why they've jumped and into a gangster lifestyle, and it made me feel more sympathy with these kids. It made me realize the horrors of what goes on, but it made me sympathize with these kids, as just because of where they live, they have to fight this war that's been going on for years, a war which they have nothing to do with, their generation has nothing to do with, but because this issue of you live here, you have to represent here, you have to go fight those guys, you have to go stab that kid, you have to go kill that kid, you can't be friends with him. It's even got to the point where people are killing their cousins because their cousins live in a different area, their cousins live in a different street, they have a different postcode. Like that's ridiculous. Like it's made me, and I guess quite a few people, feel as if the government needs to do more to help these people out, because even in Blue Story they talk about it, like one of the kids' mother is a single mother, and there's not enough support in the UK. I don't know about in Kenya or America, but there's not enough support for black single women. So these kids see these other kids who are who are doing in gangs, gaining money from it, having a bit of money, buying new shoes, buying a nice pair of shoes just for selling a bit of drugs. Then they get involved and they can't get out. Whereas if their mothers, there was financial support for their mothers, it might have ended differently. It might be better. We might be able to start solving the issue. That's just sort of my take on it.
I think that the number one thing that Black people need to do in order to begin to be like a force in society is to stop fighting each other. Because there's so much separation within the Black community itself that it's not possible to move forward all at once. Like there's a saying that if all the slaves were on the same page, then slavery would have been abolished 200 years earlier. So like, even for example, now bringing it to like modern media, like this whole, I don't know if you've seen it, Sean, because like, you know, you're a bit of a mzee, but this whole thing of No Name and J. Cole. Like J. Cole dropped a track and he was basically just talking about how, you know, um, to me, my interpretation of it was that he was talking about how the the more enlightened in the Black community need to enlighten those that know less in order to move forward together. But like, you know, obviously other people said that he was being misogynistic, this and this. And like now there's a separation at a time when Black people should be coming together.
Hmm. Like the whole black on black war in London between these gangs. How can they not see like this makes us seem like animals, like savages. The fact that we're killing each other over a postcode, does that not seem a bit backwards, a bit, you know, I don't know, it seems animalistic. Like I understand why these kids are doing it, but they need to see for themselves that they're just killing their fellow black people. They're continuing this racism towards black people. They're continuing these stigmas and stereotypes towards black people by doing this. And I don't know how we're gonna go about solving this, but we need to.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to like the same tactics that was employed for tribalism, or like when colonialists came, the same way, divide and conquer, divide the black people, the same way in slave owners, they used to be the people who used to live in the house. And when I think someone commented this about how, you know, the people in the house used to get racially abused, and then the people in the house would go and racially abuse the people who worked in the plantations. So this method of divide and conquer is like everywhere in black society, whether it's between gangs in the US or gangs in the UK or tribes here in Kenya or all around Africa. This is, I don't know how to say it, but this is clearly a problem where we're lacking being able to connect with one another. And if we're able to start communicating with each other, and like Taku said, you know, fighting over a postcode or fighting over which family you're born into so your tribe is better, nothing else but these like small, tedious things that's preventing black people from properly uprising against, you know, the oppression that we face, then if we're able to learn through these difficult circumstances and like this position that we've been put in, then we can definitely get through this. And the protests can actually become, you know, much more effective. Because Mai previously said, you know, there's only a certain extent that protests can go to. But if we're able to, you know, work together and actually become effective as a whole community, and I don't think there's anything that can stop us.
Yeah, I just have a quick question for Marcus before we bring it to the final topic for Sean. Marcus, I'm like interested to hear because like obviously you have a unique point of view. how like do you see how to what extent has like the media affected your perception and like how have you obviously like knowing black people and growing up with black people, how is that different to like what you know?
Well, I think like the media. Okay, first of all, my growing up with black people has been like totally peaceful, and like I don't have any problems with any black people or anything. But when you look at the media, if I were to not know as many black people or have the close relationships that I have with people, I'd honestly think that maybe you are like the black culture, especially in America, was a lot more aggressive. And I know you guys are talking about how there's a lot of violence between black people, and here there's something known as like I don't know, behaving black, if you will, and like, you know, they think here it's being tough for some reason, and so many, you see these like white kids just picking fights with one another outside of school, and like these are the kids who act black at our school, and they think like they're trying to be cool by doing so, but it doesn't like do anything, and it just makes it hard like for me to somehow see like these kids, people think they're acting black or whatever, when really they're just acting like idiots and they're doing stupid things and they don't know what acting black is, and their perception of a couple people and what their actions are, and then trying to recreate a couple people's actions into violence, it just makes no sense to me. But on the media point of view, like the media doesn't really touch on the creative aspects of black culture. You know, a lot of what I see in American media is kind of violence in black communities, like you guys are talking about. But there's so much more, especially now you've seen with like the George Floyd, the murals they're painting over there. You know, like there's so much they're doing that's beautiful in terms of like respecting his death and whatnot. But a lot of the media is more focused on the looting and, you know, the few black people that aren't using this opportunity to help their fellow people in their community. Instead, they're using it to loot. And Fox News, for example, I don't mean to, you know, call out Fox News, whatever, but Fox News, I've seen so much on that because I watch it like every night just to see what other news sites are saying. A lot of it is like they're trying to pin it as, you know, not every person, but a lot of people are using this as an opportunity to benefit themselves, when it's not true. Like so many people have used it as a way to better their entire community, but they instead focus on the select few who are like looting and doing unlawful acts, instead of focusing on the like the wholesomeness of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. Okay, so moving on to our final topic. It's basically Black lives can matter until the lower class Black lives matter. And by that, what I mean is, okay, first let's talk about the UK. So we finish with home. Taku probably knows a bit more about this. But for example, the Grenfell Towers, yeah, that, you know, were like that killed, I think it was 70 something people.
74.
Yeah, 74 people. The reason why the fire started in the first place was because this public housing system, mind you, they built it knowing it would house families of a lower socioeconomic class, was built with cheaper material that was just generally more flammable. And it wasn't illegal or anything, but just the fact that they could look at it and like not pay it the amount of mind it deserves, because it's for like lower income people, you know, it's like horrible. And for example, Sean, I wanted you to comment on this, is in Kenya, we've seen earlier, was it early last month or sometime during the coronavirus pandemic, was that people's homes, the minister of something ordered for people's homes to be destroyed because they were built like illegally. And once they were destroyed, they were given no permanent housing. So like, you know, it's kind of similar to Grenfell. So they were given no permanent housing, but they still had to follow curfew orders. So like, Sean, I just wanted to get your perspective on that.
Well, you see, the thing is, in Kenya, we have a lot of informal settlements in places where land is not viable for economic use. And what I think, I can't remember exactly what the excuse was, something about poor sewage, or they were trying to build a pipeline through, or some nonsense like that. But what is unfair is that the government didn't put into consideration that, yes, they're displacing people, but where are they going to put them? like the ignorance, not the ignorance, but the inability to at least put some thought into where you're putting these people is not acceptable. But I understand, like, there are other powers at play that cause this, you know. I don't know if Taku we want to add on to that.
No, I think you've said it all. But yeah.
Okay, this has been crazy because, like, originally we only had 2 topics to talk about with Sean, but we've gone on for, I think it's more than an hour.
I think it's close to 2 or 3.
Yeah, so like, we've had 2 speakers today, but like they've each been unique in their own way, but like I feel like this is more relatable. So
Yeah.
like we just want to thank you for coming on.
Well, what I want to say is I'm very grateful that you young people are thinking this way, but I hope you encourage your peers to think the same, and I hope that you get the donations you want, and I hope this conversation does not end here. And I'm very grateful that you took some time to listen to me and my very interesting responses. But I've enjoyed this conversation, and thank you guys very much for having me.
Yeah, I think thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on.
Coming I haven't been here for that long.
That means a lot.
Watching the stream.
Yeah.
Got so many fans, bro.
Wow,
That's
guys from
But
Yeah,
yeah,
we appreciate everything.
how because I've ever been.
We've been dancing around 50 this whole time, which is sick.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Oh, you're on like 8. So
Yeah,
that,
we were like on like 8. The highest was 23 in our last speaker. So like, to hit 50 is big.
Well,
now, yeah,
so
but
I'll keep pushing people this way because this is a great conversation, and I hope it impacts many Kenyan people as well as people abroad.
thanks,
Yeah.
man.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Also, try get my boy Nyamu here a modeling gig. He's been looking.
Yeah, that has been looking pang. Nyamu has been looking pang. Oh my days. Let me not even pretend. So, Nyamu, when he was coming close to the camera like this.
Nyamu's gas. Yeah. Everyone.
We can discuss later if he's interested.
Hit him up in the
Said
DM.
Nyamu, you have a future in model.
As we have
We've
everyone
heard.
here.
he just needs
I'm not sure I want to say it. You guys are actually right, bro.
Matthew.
Matthew, what? This not that. Anyways, yeah. You guys, I think we take a break, a 20-minute break. Then after the break, we're gonna come on with some Black women, like my aunt, Taku's sister, and one of my friends, so that we can get like a different perspective of like the different issues that they've faced at the different stages in their life, and just talk about more about their experiences. Because as Black men, we can't really understand. We could only look from the outside. So hopefully this can, and then we can get some questions from the comment section. So at least we can get a better understanding for everyone. And we can start pushing forward movements and actually start making actual changes. Because I don't know about you guys, but this Men Are Trash movement, so many guys are against it for the wrong reasons.
yeah.
Something that we need to change.
And just quickly before we go off, this whole time we've been talking about what can we actually do to like incite change, and the main thing, the number one thing, is education.
Yes.
And basically that's what the charity is about. The charity we're supporting, this live is supporting, is called the Black Curriculum, and it's basically just it's going towards implementing a bill in Parliament that requires schools to teach Black history. And basically, if that was done, it would just make it a lot easier for all of us to understand like what being black is, understand what like what drives prejudices, what drives racism, and like essentially put a stop to it. So like it's a charity that actually affects change. And like, you know, if you could donate as much as you could, like anything, even 50 shillings, anything
I've got
is appreciated.
I've got two things to say. First thing, the link is in the bio. It should be there. If it's not appearing, just refresh your stream. Then it should be there. Anything will help. As Maya was saying, nothing's too little. It's a great cause. We appreciate everyone who's donated so far. It means a lot. We've seen you. We need to read out a couple names to thank them. I'll probably do that just before I go on a break. But also, I recorded, I'd say a majority of this. So I'll probably, if you're okay with that, Sean, I'll probably post it on
No
the YouTube
problem.
channel so people can, if you missed a section of our talk, you can listen in. You
Did
can.
you record the previous one with
Now I had the idea to record it, but it was only we were only on for like 10 minutes after that.
that was a really good one. If
Yeah.
you missed out on that one,
That thing was also long.
The first one was my mind was blown. All of our minds were blown in the first 2 minutes.
actually, if you guys missed out on the first one, please feel free. I don't know what to tell you.
If we all thought we were against hunting and everything, but
Oh, we were told. We were
we were schooled. we were nothing less than schooled. If you caught it, our main watchers out there, Larissa, Carla, Billy, Oakley. We see you guys.
Okay.
Yeah, and also just finally, since we're going to be having different speakers on, if you're more interested in some topics than others, just look at our Instagram page, blmlive.24, and it's basically going to have all the information about what speaker we'll be having when, so you can log into what you're interested to and just, yeah.
man like facts.
Thanks, guys.
Sounds
So,
so.
No, my put up the PowerPoint.
I don't have it right now. I'm on a different laptop. Taku.
Let me read out some of the donation things before we go out. I think I left some people out. Cheers, Molly, 1 month for the donation. Cheers, Shami. So again, I think you donated previously before. Owen with a big donation. We thank you. It means a lot. Well, I think your dad donated, which is sick. He put a lot in. Aiden Lucel, thank you. Marcus, see that you donated quite recently. Thanks everyone who's donated so far. Keep the donations coming. We're at £677, and we're trying to raise 1,000. We thought that was a good goal. Anything will help. Donation link is in the bio.
What are we on?
£677.
Wow.
I thought we were still on like 400, but that's crazy.
People have come through with big donations, I can't lie.
That's more than I estimated we would make in
Same.
total. So thank you
I was
guys.
so glad when we got 200. I was like, that's enough for the whole day.
Yeah, once you reach 200, I was like, what? Alright, I was like, oh, you guys already completed this thing.
But we reached 200 so early on because of Taku's friend, bro, that donated 100.
My friends are out here. We see you, like everyone, all my friends, Thanks for donating. Thanks for promoting it. I couldn't be, more proud of you guys. Cheers. Especially in the comments. We see them.
Oh,
Okay.
12 hours gone, 12 more to go.
That's true.
Well done, guys, and keep it up. Keep the conversations flowing. I'll try. I wonder what the next one.
There you go.
Why?
Why? Okay, yeah, sorry, you can continue.
I was just saying, keep the conversations going, and I'm very interested in the next one, and I'll keep pushing. And I also want to, as you say, you'll be posting the topics, so I'll also post the topics on my platforms to help out.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
All right, guys. I leave you at that. Thanks a lot.
We appreciate it. We're halfway now.
More, it's 20.
No, we're doing 21.
Matthew, bro, why are you sitting in a black corner of a room? Can you get some light?
He's in bank, more in
Bro,
he's in
this
bank.
house is so dark.